I stood at the helm of my yacht, the Serafina, watching the horizon bleed into dusk. The ocean churned below, a restless mirror to the storm brewing in my heart. My hands gripped the polished rail, knuckles whitening as I replayed my son's words from a week ago. Don't invite her. Mom. Please. His voice had cracked, not with anger, but with a raw, pleading edge that cut deeper than any accusation. Daniel, my only child, had always been my anchor. But this time, I couldn't heed him. I had invited her, Lydia, my sister, the woman who'd torn our family apart decades ago. And now, as the Serafina cut through the waves toward the open sea, I was hosting our family reunion, a gathering I'd orchestrated with a purpose far darker than celebration. The idea had come to me in a sleepless haze, months after Daniel's warning. I'd been sifting through old photos in the attic, the kind you tuck away because they hurt too much to look at. There was one of us, me, Lydia, and our parents smiling on a beach, back when we were young and whole. Before Lydia's betrayal, before the lies that cost us our father's trust, our mother's health, and my own innocence. I'd spent 30 years burying that pain, building a life of wealth and control. But the wound never healed. It festered. And when Daniel begged me not to invite her, I saw it in his eyes too, the same hurt, passed down like a cursed heirloom. I turned from the rail, my heels clicking on the deck as I surveyed the yacht. The Serafina was my pride, a floating palace of glass and mahogany, every inch designed to my specifications. Tonight, it would be more than a luxury, it would be a stage. The family was arriving, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, and, of course, Lydia. They thought this was a chance to reconnect, to heal old wounds. They didn't know I'd planned every detail to unravel the truth, to make Lydia face what she'd done. Revenge, I told myself, wasn't petty, it was justice. The first guests arrived as the sun dipped below the horizon, their laughter drifting up from the dock. My cousin Margaret was the loudest, her voice booming as she recounted some trivial story about her new vineyard. Her husband, Tom, trailed behind, his eyes scanning the yacht with thinly veiled envy. Then came Aunt Clara, frail but sharp-tongued, leaning on her son, James, who looked as uncomfortable as ever in his ill-fitting suit. I greeted them with a practiced smile, my heart pounding as I waited for her. Lydia, the sister who'd stolen my father's affection, his fortune, and left me to pick up the pieces of a fractured family. When she stepped onto the deck, my breath caught. She hadn't changed much, still tall, still elegant, with that same auburn hair swept into a perfect chignon. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of unease. Good. She should be uneasy. Elizabeth, she said, her voice smooth as ever. This is extravagant. I forced a laugh, guiding her to the main salon where the others were gathering. The air was thick with polite chatter, but beneath it, I felt the undercurrent of old grudges, unspoken truths. Dinner was served under the stars, the table laden with crystal and silver, the food impeccable. I watched Lydia across the table, her smile too perfect, her stories too polished. She spoke of her travels, her charity work, as if she could erase the past with charm. The others ate it up, laughing at her jokes, nodding at her anecdotes. Only Daniel, seated beside me, was silent. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on his plate. I reached for his hand under the table, but he pulled away. Don't invite her, he'd said, and I hadn't listened. As the night wore on, I felt the weight of my plan pressing down. I'd hired a private investigator months ago, digging into Lydia's life. What I'd found confirmed everything, the lies she'd told our father, The money she'd siphoned. The way she'd manipulated him into cutting me out of his will. I'd kept the evidence locked in a safe below deck, waiting for the right moment. Tonight, I'd confront her. I'd show them all who she really was. But as I watched her laugh, clinking glasses with Margaret, a strange doubt crept in. What if she'd changed? What if this wasn't justice, but vengeance? The yacht rocked gently, the ocean whispering secrets. I excused myself, slipping below deck to the safe. My fingers trembled as I punched in the code, pulling out the folder of documents. Bank statements, forged signatures, letters Lydia had written to our father, painting me as unstable, unworthy. The proof was undeniable. But as I held it, I thought of Daniel's plea, his fear. Was I doing this for him? For our family or for myself? I returned to the deck, the folder tucked under my arm. The guests were dancing now, the music swelling over the waves. Lydia stood apart, gazing out at the sea. For a moment, I saw the girl she'd been me sister, my confidant. Before everything fell apart, I steeled myself, stepping toward her. Lydia, I said, my voice low. We need to talk. Her eyes widened, but she nodded, following me to a quiet corner of the deck. The stage was set. The truth was coming. The night air was cool, carrying the salt of the sea and the weight of unspoken words. Lydia stood before me, her silhouette sharp against the moonlit waves. I clutched the folder, its edges digging into my palms, grounding me in my resolve. What's this about, Elizabeth? She asked, her voice steady but her eyes searching mine. I wanted to scream, to spill every accusation, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't just about Might, it was about Daniel, about the family she'd fractured. I opened the folder, pulling out the first document, a bank statement with her name in bold. Do you recognize this? I asked, holding it up. Her face paled, but she didn't flinch. Elizabeth, I don't know what you're trying to prove. Her denial ignited something in me, a spark of the old rage I'd buried for years. I stepped closer, my voice low but sharp. Don't lie to me, Lydia. Not anymore. This is proof of the money you took, the lies you told Dad. You made him believe I was nothing. Her lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, I saw a crack in her composure, a flicker of something guilt. Fear. I couldn't tell. The yacht swayed beneath us, the music from the deck a distant hum. I pressed on, pulling out the letters, her handwriting unmistakable. You told him I was unstable, that I couldn't be trusted. You turned him against me. Lydia's eyes darted to the papers, then back to me. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling now. I was young, Elizabeth. I was desperate. Desperate. The word hit me like a slap. I'd been desperate too, watching our father's love slip away, watching our mother waste away in grief. But I hadn't betrayed anyone. I hadn't stolen. Desperate. I spat. You destroyed us. You left me to pick up the pieces, to raise Daniel alone while you lived your perfect life. Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But then she straightened, her mask slipping back into place. You've always seen what you wanted to see, Elizabeth. You never asked my side. Her side. The audacity of it burned through me. I wanted to shove the folder in her face, to make her read every word she'd written. But a shout from the deck stopped me. It was Daniel, his voice cutting through the night. Mom. I turned, my heart lurching. He stood at the edge of the dance floor, his face pale, his eyes locked on us. The other guests were staring now, the music faltering. I tucked the folder under my arm, forcing a smile. Everything's fine, I called, but my voice shook. Daniel didn't move. He knew. He'd always known this reunion wasn't about healing, it was about settling scores. I led Lydia back to the main deck, my mind racing. The plan was unraveling. I'd wanted to confront her privately, to control the narrative. But now the family was watching, their eyes heavy with curiosity. Margaret approached, her wineglass in hand, her smile too wide. What's going on? Liz. You two look like you're plotting a coup. The others laughed, but it was strained, the air thick with tension. I glanced at Lydia, expecting her to deflect, to charm her way out. But she was silent, her gaze fixed on the floor. Dinner resumed, but the mood had shifted. The clink of silverware felt too loud, the conversation forced. Daniel sat beside me again, his silence heavier than before. I wanted to reach for him, to explain, but the folder in my lap felt like a bomb. I'd planned to reveal everything after dessert, to lay out the evidence in front of everyone. But now I wasn't sure. Lydia's words, "You never asked my side," echoed in my mind, sowing doubt. What if there was more to the story? What if I'd been wrong all these years? As the servers cleared the plates, I caught Daniel's eye. He looked older than his 25 years, his face etched with worry. I remembered the nights he'd cried as a boy, asking why Aunt Lydia never visited, why Grandpa never called. I'd shielded him from the truth, telling him stories of a family that didn't exist. Now, I was dragging him into the mess I'd sworn to protect him from. I leaned toward him, whispering, "I'm sorry." He shook his head, his voice barely audible. "You should have listened to me." The music started again, and the guests drifted back to the dance floor. But I couldn't move. Lydia was across the deck, talking to James, her laughter bright but brittle. I watched her, searching for the sister I'd once loved, the one who'd braided my hair and shared my secrets. Was she still in there, buried under years of lies? Or was this all a performance, a way to dodge accountability? The folder burned in my hands, the weight of my decision pressing down. I could expose her now, ruin her in front of everyone. Or I could wait, dig deeper, give her a chance to explain. The yacht hit a wave, jolting me back to the moment. Daniel stood, his chair scraping against the deck. "I'm going below," he said, his voice flat. I wanted to follow him, to beg him to understand. But I stayed rooted, the folder a tether to my anger. Lydia glanced my way, her eyes unreadable. For the first time, I wondered if this reunion wasn't just about her, it was about me. About what I was willing to become to make her pay. The Serafina glided through the night, its lights casting golden ripples on the black water. I stood alone at the stern, the folder still clutched to my chest, its contents a ticking clock. The music from the deck had softened, the guests' laughter fading into murmurs as the night deepened. I should have felt powerful, in control. This was my yacht, my reunion, my moment. But all I felt was the gnawing uncertainty Lydia's words had planted. "You never asked my side." What side could justify what she'd done? Yet the question lingered, eroding my certainty like the waves against the hull. I glanced toward the main salon, where Daniel had retreated. His absence was a weight, heavier than the folder in my hands. I'd raised him to be honest, to face pain head-on. But here I was, orchestrating a spectacle of revenge instead of truth. I wanted to go to him, to explain. But what could I say? That I was doing this for us. That exposing Lydia would somehow heal the wounds she'd left. The truth was murkier. This was about my pain, my need to make her hurt as I had. I moved toward the salon, my steps heavy, Inside, Daniel sat on a leather sofa, staring at his phone, his face lit by the cold glow of the screen. He didn't look up as I approached. "Daniel," I said softly, sitting beside him. He tensed, his thumb pausing mid-scroll. "I didn't want this," he said, his voice low. "I told you not to invite her. Why couldn't you let it go?" I swallowed, the folder pressing against my ribs. "Because she hurt us," I said. "She hurt you. I can't forgive that." He finally met my eyes, and the pain there stopped my breath. "You're not doing this for me, Mom. You're doing it for you." His words cut deeper than I expected, slicing through the armor I'd built. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but the truth was in his eyes. He'd seen through me from the start. I reached for his hand, but he stood, moving to the window. "I'm not a kid anymore," he said. "I don't need you to fight my battles." I watched him, my strong, quiet son, and felt the ground shift beneath me. This wasn't just about Lydia, it was about him, about the family I'd failed to protect. I left him there, needing air, needing space. Back on the deck, the party was winding down. Margaret was tipsy, leaning on Tom, who looked ready to escape. Aunt Clara was dozing in a chair, James hovering nearby. Lydia was nowhere in sight. Panic flickered in my chest had she left, slipped away before I could confront her. I scanned the deck, my pulse racing, until I spotted her at the bow, alone, her hands gripping the rail as she stared into the darkness. I approached, the folder a heavy anchor. "Lydia," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She turned, her face pale in the moonlight. "What do you want, Elizabeth?" she asked, her tone weary. I held up the folder. "The truth. I want the truth." She sighed, her shoulders sagging. "You think you have it all figured out, don't you? You think I'm the villain." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "You made that easy. The letters, the money, you took everything." She stepped closer, her eyes blazing now. "You want the truth? Fine. I didn't do it for me. I did it for Mom." I froze, the words hitting like a rogue wave. "What?" I whispered. Lydia's voice trembled, but she didn't look away. "Dad was going to leave her, Elizabeth. He was going to take everything, his money, his love, and walk away. I couldn't let that happen. Mom was sick, fragile. She needed him." I shook my head, the folder slipping in my grip. "So you lied. You turned him against me to keep him with her." Her silence was answer enough. I felt the world tilt, the yacht no longer steady beneath me. All these years, I'd painted Lydia as the monster, the thief who'd stolen my place in our father's heart. But now, her words cracked that narrative open. "I was 19, she said, her voice breaking. "I thought I was saving her. I didn't know it would destroy us." Destroy us. The words echoed Daniel's, a reminder of the collateral damage I'd ignored in my quest for justice. I stumbled back, the folder falling to the deck, papers scattering. Lydia reached for me, but I pulled away, my mind reeling. If she was telling the truth, then everything I believed was a lie. But could I trust her? After all these years, all her secrets. The music stopped, the guests turning toward us, their faces a blur. I saw Daniel in the doorway, watching, his expression unreadable. I wanted to run to him, to beg him to help me make sense of this. But I was rooted, caught between rage and doubt. Lydia knelt, gathering the papers, her hands shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered, so quiet I almost missed it. Sorry. The word was too small. Too late. Yet it landed like a stone in my chest, heavy with possibility. Was this the redemption I'd never dared to imagine? Or another lie to dodge accountability? The ocean roared around us, the Serafina carrying us further into the night. And I knew the truth was still out there, waiting to be claimed. The scattered papers lay at my feet, their edges fluttering in the sea breeze. Lydia's apology hung in the air, fragile as the moonlight on the waves. I wanted to believe her, to cling to the possibility that she'd acted out of love, not greed. But the years of pain, the decades of silence, screamed louder than her words. I bent to retrieve the folder, my hands trembling as I stuffed the documents back inside. The guests were watching now, their murmurs a low hum. But I didn't care. This was between me and Lydia, a reckoning long overdue. Elizabeth, she said, stepping closer, her voice soft but urgent. I know I hurt you. I know I broke everything. But I'm not that person anymore. I laughed, a harsh sound that echoed over the deck. Not that person. You built your life on lies. Lydia, you let me carry the blame. Let Daniel grow up without a family. Her eyes glistened, but I pressed on, my voice rising. You don't get to say sorry and walk away. Not this time. She flinched, but didn't retreat. I'm not walking away, she said. I came here, didn't I? I knew you'd hate me, but I came. Her words caught me off guard. Why had she come? If she knew I'd planned this reunion to expose her, why board the Serafina at all? I searched her face, looking for the sister I'd once known. But all I saw was a stranger wearing her skin. Why? I demanded. Why show up if you knew I'd have this? I shook the folder, its weight a reminder of my purpose. Lydia's gaze dropped to the papers, then back to me. Because I'm tired, she said simply. Tired of running from it. Tired of pretending it didn't happen. Her voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw the weight she carried, etched in the lines around her eyes. I wanted to scream that she deserved it, that her guilt was nothing compared to mine. But something in her expression stopped me, a vulnerability I hadn't expected. Before I could respond, Daniel appeared beside me, his presence a quiet storm. Mom. Stop, he said, his voice low but firm. I turned, startled. His eyes were on Lydia, not me, and they held something I couldn't read: anger. Yes, but also something softer, something that scared me. Daniel, I started, but he shook his head. This isn't fixing anything, he said. You're tearing us apart again. His words hit like a punch, stealing my breath. I'd thought I was protecting him, avenging him. But he didn't want vengeance, he wanted peace. The guests were silent now, the music long gone. Margaret hovered nearby, her wineglass forgotten, her eyes wide with curiosity. Aunt Clara was awake, her sharp gaze darting between us. I felt exposed, raw, as if the Serafina's polished deck had become a courtroom. I tightened my grip on the folder, my plans slipping through my fingers. Daniel, I said, my voice breaking. I'm doing this for you. For us. He shook his head again, stepping closer to Lydia. No, Mom. You're doing it because you can't let go. Lydia reached out, her hand brushing Daniel's arm. He didn't pull away. I'm sorry, Daniel, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I never meant to hurt you. He looked at her, his jaw tight, but he didn't speak. I felt a pang of betrayal, sharp and cold. How could he stand there, letting her touch him, after everything? I wanted to scream, to demand he choose a side. But the look in his eyes stopped me. He wasn't choosing her, was choosing himself. I turned away, my vision blurring. The ocean stretched endless before me, a void that mirrored the one in my chest. I'd planned this night to reclaim justice, to make Lydia pay. But now I was the one unraveling. Her story about saving our mother, could it be true? I'd spent years hating her, building a narrative of her as the villain. But what if I'd missed something? What if my anger had blinded me to the truth? I walked to the rail, needing distance. The folder felt heavier now, its contents less certain. I thought of my mother, her frail hands, her quiet tears in those final years. Had Lydia really lied to keep our father with her? Or was this another manipulation? A way to dodge accountability? I didn't know anymore. The Serafina rocked gently, a reminder that we were far from shore, far from safety. Daniel joined me at the rail, his silence heavy. I didn't want this, he said again, softer now. I looked at him. My son, the one constant in my life. I thought I was protecting you, I said, my voice raw. He shook his head, his eyes on the horizon. You can't protect me by holding on to hate. His words were a knife, cutting through the walls I'd built. I wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't understand. But deep down, I knew he was right. Lydia stood alone now, the guests giving her space. I watched her, torn between the sister I'd loved and the enemy I'd created. The folder was still in my hands, the truther part of it waiting to be unleashed. But as I looked at Daniel, at the pain in his eyes, I wondered if the truth was worth the cost. The night was far from over, and the Serafina was carrying us toward a reckoning I wasn't sure I was ready for. The stars above the Serafina were sharp, cutting through the velvet sky, indifferent to the chaos unfolding below. I stood at the rail, Daniel beside me, the folder a silent weight between us. His words echoed in my mind. You can't protect me by holding on to hate. They stung because they were true. I told myself this reunion was about justice, about righting wrongs. But Daniel saw it for what it was, a vendetta, dressed up in righteous anger. I glanced at him, his profile etched against the night, and felt a surge of guilt. He deserved better than this. Lydia was still at the bow, her silhouette solitary. The guests had retreated to the salon, their whispers a low buzz. But I could feel their eyes on us, waiting for the next act in this family drama. I wanted to end it, to throw the folder into the sea and let the waves swallow our past. But the truth was a hook in my heart, pulling me back. I needed answers, not just for me, but for Daniel, for the family we'd lost. I turned to him, my voice soft. Daniel, I need to know. I need to understand what happened. He didn't look at me, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Then ask her, he said. But don't do it to hurt her. Do it to move on. Move on. The words felt impossible, like asking me to shed my own skin. But for him, I'd try. I nodded, squeezing his shoulder, and walked toward Lydia. She didn't turn as I approached, but I saw her shoulders tense. Lydia, I said, my voice steadier now. Tell me everything. No more lies. She faced me, her eyes weary but clear. I've told you the truth, she said. I did it for Mom. Dad was leaving. Elizabeth. He had a mistress, a new life planned. I found the letters, the bank transfers. He was going to abandon us. Her words hit like a wave, cold and disorienting. I'd never known about a mistress, never suspected our father's betrayal ran that deep. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice breaking. We could have faced it together. She shook her head, a bitter smile on her lips. You were his favorite, Elizabeth. Always. If I told you, you wouldn't have believed me. You'd have defended him. I wanted to argue, to say she was wrong. But the memory of my father's smile, his pride in me, stopped me. She was right, I'd have chosen him. Lydia continued, her voice low, almost lost in the wind. I forged the letters, made it look like you were the problem. I thought if he doubted you, he'd stay. Focus on fixing the family instead of leaving. It worked. For a while. But Mom got worse. And he blamed you. I didn't expect that. Her voice cracked. And she looked away, her hands gripping the rail. I didn't expect him to cut you out completely. I felt the world shift again, the folder heavy in my hands. All these years, I'd blamed her for his rejection, for the will that left me nothing. But now, her story painted a different picture, one where she was a desperate girl trying to hold a family together, not tear it apart. Why didn't you tell me later? I asked, my voice raw. After he died. After Mom was gone, why keep lying? She met my eyes, tears glinting. Because I was ashamed. And I knew you'd never forgive me. I stood there, the folder a barrier between us. The documents inside were proof of her betrayal. But they didn't tell the whole story. I thought of Daniel, of his plea to move on. Could I? Could I let go of 30 years of anger, of pain? I opened the folder, pulling out the letters, her handwriting stark against the page. This, I said, holding them up. This destroyed me. Lydia nodded, tears falling now. I know. And I'll carry that forever. The guests were watching from the salon, their faces pressed to the glass. I saw Margaret's curiosity, Clara's judgment, James's discomfort. They were waiting for me to explode, to tear Lydia apart in front of them. But as I looked at her, crying, broken, I felt something shift. Revenge wouldn't heal me. It wouldn't give Daniel the family he deserved. I dropped the letters, letting them scatter across the deck. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said, my voice barely audible. But I want to try. Lydia's breath hitched, her hand reaching for mine. I didn't pull away this time. Her touch was tentative, warm, a reminder of the sister I'd lost. Daniel approached, his steps slow, his eyes on us. Mom, he said, his voice soft but firm. Let's go inside. I nodded, letting Lydia's hand fall. The folder was empty now, its contents carried away by the wind. I didn't know what came next, but for the first time, I felt the possibility of something new, not vengeance, but redemption. We walked back to the salon, the three of us, the ocean roaring around us. The guests parted as we entered, their whispers fading. I saw Aunt Clara's nod, a rare gesture of approval. Margaret looked disappointed, her drama denied. But I didn't care. This wasn't about them. It was about us, me, Daniel, Lydia. The Serafina sailed on, carrying us toward an uncertain dawn. But for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. The salon was warm, the soft glow of the chandeliers casting shadows across the faces of my family. Daniel sat beside me, his presence a quiet strength, while Lydia took a seat across from us, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The guests had settled into an uneasy silence, their earlier chatter replaced by a heavy anticipation. They knew something had shifted out there on the deck, but they didn't understand what. I didn't fully understand it myself. The folder was gone, its secrets scattered to the wind, but the weight of 30 years still pressed against my chest. I looked at Lydia, her face pale but composed, and felt a tangle of emotions: anger, pity, hope. Her confession had cracked open the story I'd told myself for decades, but it hadn't erased the pain. I wanted to believe her, to see her as the sister who'd acted out of love, not malice. But trust was a fragile thing, and ours had been broken too long. Daniel's hand brushed mine, a subtle reminder of why I was here, not just for me, but for him. For us. Aunt Clara spoke first, her voice cutting through the silence. Well, Elizabeth, are you going to tell us what's going on? Or are we supposed to guess? Her tone was sharp, but there was a glint in her eye. A challenge. I glanced at Lydia, then at Daniel. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, giving me permission to speak. I took a breath, steadying myself. This reunion, I began, my voice low but clear, wasn't just about bringing us together. It was about the truth. The room stilled, every eye on me. Margaret leaned forward, her curiosity naked. Tom shifted uncomfortably, as if sensing the storm to come. I continued, choosing my words carefully. For years, I believed Lydia betrayed me. Betrayed all of us. I had proof letters, bank statements that showed she turned my father against me, taken what was mine. Lydia's head bowed, her hands tightening. But tonight, she told me something else. Something I didn't know. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. The guests exchanged glances, their murmurs rising. Clara's eyes narrowed, but she didn't interrupt. Lydia says she did it to protect our mother, I said, my voice catching. To keep our father from leaving her. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if I can believe her. But I'm tired of hating her. I'm tired of letting the past define us. Daniel's hand squeezed mine, a silent approval. Lydia looked up, her eyes wet, but she didn't speak. The room was alive with whispers now, the family dissecting my words, their judgments forming. Margaret's voice broke through, sharp and skeptical. So, what? You're just forgiving her. After everything. I met her gaze, my resolve hardening. I'm not forgiving her. Margaret, I'm trying to understand. There's a difference. The words felt like a release, a crack in the wall I'd built. Clara nodded, her lips pursed. You've got more grace than I would. Elizabeth, she said, her tone softer now. James, silent until now, spoke up, his voice hesitant. Maybe it's time we all let go. We've all got skeletons, don't we? His words hung there, a quiet truth. I thought of my own mistakes, the years I'd spent nursing my anger, pushing Daniel away in my obsession with revenge. Lydia finally spoke, her voice trembling but clear. I don't expect forgiveness, she said, looking at me. Then Daniel. I don't deserve it, but I want to make it right. Whatever that means. Her words were raw, unguarded, and for the first time, I saw the weight of her guilt. It didn't erase what she'd done, but it humanized her, made her more than the villain I'd created. Daniel shifted beside me, his voice quiet but firm. It's not about forgiving you, Aunt Lydia. It's about moving forward. I don't want to lose my mom to this. His words hit me hard, a reminder of what was at stake. I'd brought us here to tear Lydia down, but now I saw the cost me son, my family, my own peace. I looked at him, my heart swelling with pride and pain. He was right. This wasn't about settling scores anymore. It was about finding a way to heal. The guests began to talk among themselves, their voices a low hum. Some were skeptical, others sympathetic, but I didn't care. This wasn't their story, it was ours. I stood, addressing the room. This reunion isn't what I planned, I said, but maybe it's what we needed. We've all carried pain, all held grudges. Maybe it's time we stop. The words felt foreign, but right. I looked at Lydia. Then Daniel. I don't know what comes next, but I want to try. For my son. For all of us. The Serafina rocked gently. The ocean a steady presence. Lydia stood, her movement slow, and approached me. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't respond, but I didn't turn away. Daniel took my hand, his grip strong, and for the first time that night, I felt anchored, not by anger, but by hope. The night wasn't over, but the storm inside me was beginning to calm. The Serafina sailed on, its engines a low hum beneath the chatter of the guests. The tension in the salon had eased, replaced by a cautious warmth, as if my words had opened a door no one expected. I sat with Daniel, his hand still in mine, grounding me. Lydia remained across from us, her eyes downcast, her silence heavy but not defensive. The family was talking now, their voices overlapping stories of old times, of shared summers, of the life we'd had before it all fell apart. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. I watched Lydia, trying to reconcile the woman before me with the sister I'd hated for so long. Her confession had shifted something in me, but it hadn't erased the pain. I thought of our mother, her quiet strength, her slow decline after our father's betrayal. Had Lydia really done it for her? The question gnawed at me, but I didn't have the energy to fight it anymore. Daniel's words moved forward were my compass now. Margaret approached, her wineglass refilled, her smile less sharp than before. You've got guts, Liz, she said, sitting beside me. I wouldn't have let her off so easy. I smiled faintly, shaking my head. I haven't let her off, Margaret. I'm just trying to understand. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't push. Instead, she turned to Daniel, her tone lighter. You're a good kid. You know that. Keeping your mom in line. He laughed, a rare sound that warmed me. Someone's got to do it, he said, glancing at me with a mix of affection and exasperation. The night wore on, the guests drifting between the salon and the deck, the mood lighter but still fragile. Aunt Clara pulled me aside, her grip surprisingly strong for her age. You did the right thing, she said, her voice low. Not for her, but for you. Holding on to Haiti, it's a poison. I nodded, surprised by her insight. Clara had always been sharp, but I hadn't expected her to see through me so clearly. Thanks, I said, my voice thick. She patted my arm, then shuffled back to her chair, leaving me with her words. I found Lydia on the deck again, staring at the sea. The wind had picked up, tugging at her hair, and for a moment, she looked like the girl I'd known, the one who'd chased me through the surf. Laughing, I approached, my steps quiet. Lydia, I said, and she turned, her face softer now, less guarded. I don't know if I can trust you, I said honestly, but I want to try. For Daniel's sake. She nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. That's more than I deserve, she said. We stood there, the ocean stretching endless before us, and I felt the weight of the past begin to lift. It wasn't gone, maybe it never would be, but it was lighter. Shared. I thought of the folder, its papers lost to the wind, and realized I didn't need them anymore. The truth wasn't in those documents, it was in us. In the messy, painful reality of our family. Daniel joined us, his presence a bridge between us. You okay, Mom? He asked, his voice gentle. I nodded, managing a smile. Getting there, I said. He looked at Lydia, then back at me, and I saw something in his eyes, hope. Maybe. or the beginning of it. Good, he said, and for the first time that night, he hugged me, his arms strong and sure. The guests were starting to retire, their yawns signaling the end of the night. I looked around at my family, flawed, fractured, but still here. I'd planned this reunion to destroy Lydia, to reclaim what I'd lost. But instead, I'd found something else. Not justice, not revenge, but a chance to rebuild. The Serafina was turning back toward shore, its lights cutting through the darkness. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to face it. Lydia touched my arm, her gesture tentative. "Can we talk tomorrow?" she asked, her voice small. I hesitated, then nodded. "Tomorrow," I said. It wasn't a promise of forgiveness, but it was a start. Daniel smiled, a quiet approval, and I felt a warmth I hadn't known in years. The ocean stretched before us, vast and unyielding, but we were together, and that was enough for now. As the yacht neared the harbor, I looked at my son, my sister, my family. The storm was passing, the dawn not far off. I'd come here seeking vengeance, but I was leaving with something more, a chance to heal, to be whole. The Serafina carried us home, and I carried a new truth. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about finding a way to live with it. The Serafina docked at dawn, the first light of morning painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. The guests were quiet now, their bags packed, their goodbyes soft but sincere. I stood on the deck, watching them disembark, their figures small against the sprawling harbor. Daniel was beside me, his arm around my shoulders, a silent reassurance. Lydia was the last to leave, her suitcase in hand, her eyes meeting mine one final time. "I'll call you," she said, her voice steady but hopeful. I nodded, unable to say more. The distance between us was still there, but it was no longer a chasm. As the yacht emptied, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The reunion I'd planned as a battlefield had become something else, a reckoning. Yes, but also a release. I'd come here to destroy Lydia, to expose her sins. But instead, I'd faced my own. Her confession, her tears, had forced me to see her not as a villain, but as a sister, flawed and human. And Daniel, me son, my heart had shown me what truly mattered. Not revenge, not justice, but the chance to rebuild what we'd lost. We walked to the gangway, the Serafina silent behind us. The ocean was calm now, its surface a mirror for the rising sun. I thought of the folder, its papers lost to the sea, and felt no regret. The truth wasn't in those documents, it was in the words we'd spoken, the pain we'd shared, the tentative steps toward healing. Daniel squeezed my shoulder, his smile small but real. "You did good, Mom," he said, and the words warmed me more than the dawn. The drive home was quiet, the city waking around us. Daniel stared out the window, his thoughts his own, but I felt closer to him than I had in years. I'd spent so long protecting him from the past. I'd forgotten to let him in. Now, I saw his strength, his clarity, and I knew I'd underestimated him. "I'm proud of you," I said, my voice soft. He glanced at me, surprised, then smiled. "I'm proud of you too," he said, and I felt tears prick my eyes. Back at the house, I found myself in the attic again, the same place where this had all begun. The old photos were still there, scattered across the floor. I picked one up, me and Lydia, young and laughing, our arms around each other. For the first time, I didn't feel anger looking at it. I felt loss. Yes, but also possibility. I tucked the photo into my pocket, a reminder of what we'd been, what we could be again. Lydia called the next day, as promised. Her voice was hesitant, but warm, and we talked not about the past, but about the present, about Daniel, about her life, about mine. It was awkward, stilted, but it was a start. Over the weeks that followed, we spoke more, each conversation a brick in a new foundation. Daniel joined us sometimes, his presence easing the tension, guiding us towards something new. The family changed too. Margaret called. Her usual bravado softened, asking about Lydia, about me. Clara sent a letter, her handwriting shaky but her words kind, urging me to keep going. Even James, quiet James, reached out, offering to meet for coffee, to talk about the old days. The Serafina had been a crucible, burning away the lies we'd told ourselves, leaving us raw but ready to rebuild. Months later, I stood on the deck of the Serafina again, alone this time. The yacht was moored, the sea calm, the sky clear. I thought of that night, of the storm inside me, of Daniel's plea and Lydia's truth. I'd come seeking revenge, but I'd found redemption not just for Lydia, but for myself. I'd learned to let go, to choose love over hate, family over pain. Daniel joined me, his footsteps soft on the deck. Thinking about that night, he asked, leaning against the rail. I nodded, smiling, thinking about how lucky I am to have you. He laughed, nudging my shoulder. You're not so bad yourself, Mom. We stood there, watching the waves. The future opened before us. The Serafina was still, but we were moving forward, together. The story of our family wasn't over. There would be more pain, more questions, more healing. But for now, we had Fee's a new beginning, fragile but real. I thought of Lydia, of her promise to make things right. And I believed her. Not because I trusted her fully, but because I trusted Usme, Daniel, our family. The ocean stretched before us, endless and alive. And I knew we'd find our way.